The radio world and rock lovers across America are steeped in grief and disbelief as Pierre Robert, the 70-year-old man whose voice accompanied Philadelphia for over 4 decades, takes his final bow. On the morning of the 29th of October 2025, that FM icon passed away in silence, closing a life wholly dedicated to music and people. One of his most haunting confessions now echoes like a prophecy fulfilled. "When I stop talking, that might be the day my heart stops beating." In the small third-floor studio at WMMR headquarters, where he sat through thousands of noontimes, the familiar microphone stands still, the coffee cup half full, the red on-air light extinguished. Outside the glass window, a light Philadelphia rain blurs the gray sky, as if the entire city is bowing its head to bid farewell to the man who once made them laugh, reflect, and fall silent. Pierre was not just a DJ, he was the soul of radio, the voice of an era, the one who turned lunchtime into a ritual of connection, memory, and kindness. For over 44 years, he didn't just play music, he told stories, shared, and listened something rare in an increasingly noisy and cold world. But now, that world falls silent. The streets that once echoed with rushing cars now hold only the sound of falling rain. In kitchens, garages, coffee shops, people pause midday, turn on the radio out of years-long habit, only to hear the reverberation of absence. No more "great day in the morning" greeting, no more husky laugh, just faint static like the erratic heartbeat of a city that has lost its storyteller. Millions of listeners, from the generation that grew up with Pink Floyd to young people who only knew his name through podcasts, all share an unnameable emptiness. Pierre once said, "I'm just a guardian of the music, and when the music stops, I'll go with it." Today, those words become reality. For WMMR, for Philadelphia, and for America, losing Pierre Robert is not just losing a voice, it is losing a piece of music's very soul. For the first time since 1981, the city heard only static, and silence never felt so loud. Pierre Robert was born in California in the mid-1000s, 950 seconds a time, when America was shaking with rock, war, and the cries of a generation wanting to define itself. But in the small suburban home where he grew up, no music played, only the sound of a wall clock and brief, cold conversations. His father was a stern man, leaving early and returning late, believing emotions were a luxury. His mother was kind but weary, her life revolving only around work and the kitchen. They loved their son in silence, but for Pierre, that silence was a deep pit never to be filled. The boy soon learned to withdraw, living in his own world where radio waves became his only companions. At school, Pierre didn't stand out. His hair was longer than the other boys, his gaze distant, his hands always holding tapes or a Rolling Stone magazine. Teachers thought he lacked focus. Friends called him "weird kid," the odd one. He wasn't good at sports, didn't like parties, just liked sitting for hours by an old radio, turning the dial, listening to strange voices coming from far away. To Pierre, those DJs didn't just talk about music, they talked about feelings, freedom, things his parents never acknowledged existed. Every night, he'd pull the blanket over his head, lie still, listen to someone talk about love, loneliness, hope, and feel like the world suddenly opened another door he could step through. At home, his father once said, "Music doesn't feed anyone." His mother sighed, "He dreams too much to survive." Those words followed him for years, like a soft wound that never scarred over. Pierre didn't rebel, didn't argue, but inside, a small seed began to sprout. If the world didn't want to listen, he would create another world where everyone could be heard. At 17, one summer night, Pierre drove his old car to the California coast. It was dark, waves crashing hard on the shore, salty wind whipping the windows. He turned on the radio, expecting nothing but a sound to fill the emptiness in his head. And then, a stranger's DJ voice came on, husky and warm, speaking slowly. If you feel unseen, music sees you. Those words stopped Pierre cold. Amid the waves and wind, he felt like someone was speaking directly to him. All the loneliness, all the hurt, all the times he was overlooked, suddenly named. In that moment, he understood music doesn't just save the listener. It gives them a reason to exist. Pierre wasn't born to shine on stage. He was born to listen, to connect, to be the bridge between people and music. He wasn't born to perform, he was born to listen. After that night, Pierre started recording his voice on an old cassette. He practiced talking, telling, breathing with the music. Each time he played it back, he heard not just his own sound, but the breath of a dream taking shape. But the world wasn't ready for him yet. While friends went to college, Pierre worked in a small record store, dusting vinyl sleeves, jotting down artist names. Occasionally, he sent demo tapes to local stations and got rejection letters back. "Your voice is too strange, too slow, too sad." Some said that, but Pierre didn't get angry, didn't give up. He just smiled, thinking, maybe they haven't heard my part yet. In an era exploding with disco, glam, and bright pop, he stayed with the hazy, long, haunting tracks Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead, The Who. That music was like him. Not loud, not perfect, but real. Years later, when asked about his youth, Pierre just laughed. "I never really fit anywhere. But maybe that's why radio found me before I found it." No one knew that lonely night by the coast shaped his entire life. It wasn't a grand beginning, but a quiet promise between a person and music. No matter if the world forgot, he would still speak, still listen, still hold tenderness in the static of the world. And from the loneliness of that boy who didn't fit the world, a radio legend was seeded quietly, persistently, and fatefully. In the 1970 seconds, when America still echoed with Woodstock sounds and war's aftershocks, Pierre Robert turned 20 with a suitcase of clothes, a few music tapes, and a dream so small it was almost pitiful, to speak through a microphone. He dropped out of college after realizing he didn't belong anywhere, not classrooms, not offices, not even the paths others called stable. He lived in an old cream-colored van named Minerva, which was home, mini radio station, and sole companion. At night, he parked by the beach, watched distant city lights blur, and recorded his voice. Slow, husky, a bit choked, not an ad voice, but one for others to listen to. He taped music from old cassettes, interspersing a few shares, sometimes just a check-in into the void. "If you're awake right now, I hope you're okay." Then he'd play it back, listen to himself, and smile alone. Somewhere, he felt like he was talking to the whole world, even if only he was in the dark. Every morning, Pierre woke early, washed with cold bottled water, then mailed those recorded tapes to small stations around California. Each mailing was hope, and each hope turned to disappointment with return envelopes. A few replied politely, "Thanks for your interest, but your voice doesn't fit our style." Others were silent. After 10, then 20, then 50 times, he started believing the world didn't need another voice like his. Some nights, rain poured on the van roof. Pierre opened his notebook, scribbling shakily by flashlight. "They don't hear me. Maybe I don't exist." Those scrawled words blurred from rain, or tears, maybe both. His body grew weaker. Eating haphazardly, living in dust, Pierre visibly thinned. Old friends rarely saw him, and family thought he was destroying his life. An old friend also, a former record store co-worker, found him, saw him lying in the van, exhausted and gaunt. He sat down, silent for a long while, then said just one thing. "Maybe the place you belong hasn't come yet, Pierre." That sentence was like a small flame in the night, not enough to chase the dark, but enough for him to stand. He started recording new tapes, sending farther to Oregon, Texas, even the East Coast. He added a note at the end of each letter. "I'm still here, still trying." Years later, he said that time was the longest rain in my life, not just for poverty, but for loneliness so deep, The wind hitting the van made him cry. But in that isolation, he learned what later made the difference. Listening. Listening to the smallest sounds, rain, tires, his own heart. Every sound, even faint, had a soul, and he believed one day someone would hear him. Fall of 1981. After nearly 10 years wandering America, Pierre woke on a cold morning, sat in the van reading mail. Among the envelopes was a short note from someone he'd never met. WMMR in Philadelphia is looking for a voice. They said they want someone real. I told them about you. Pierre read it several times, heart pounding. The words, someone real, made him tremble. His whole life he'd tried to be real. Not perfect, not technical, just true. That afternoon, he recorded a new intro tape, not trying to be a DJ, just talking like telling a story to someone far away. If you can hear this, I'd love to be part of your world. He sent it to Philadelphia without hope. A week later, a payphone rang while he was buying coffee. The man's voice on the other end was deep and steady. This is Wimham Radio. We heard your tape. We'd like you to come in. Pierre stood frozen for a long while, speechless. All surrounding sounds vanished, leaving only his heartbeat and the wind. He looked up at the sky, gray, dreary, but in his eyes, light. After 10 years searching for a place to belong, finally, sound had called his name. And though he didn't know the future, Pierre knew one thing. His lost journey was about to reach the starting point of destiny. The flight to Philadelphia in fall 1981 was a journey no one remembers. But for Pierre, it was the boundary between two lives. He boarded with just a small suitcase, a few clothes, a notebook, and a worn Grateful Dead tape box. No friends, no send-off, no promises ahead. When the plane landed at Philadelphia International Airport, the sky was thick gray like ash, early winter winds cutting through the trees. Pierre dragged his old suitcase through the terminal, looked up at the WMMR station sign, for the first time a not large building, but to him, a light in the night of 10 lost years. He arrived at the door, clutching his demo tape tightly, heart pounding. The technical manager greeted him, half believing, half doubting, said, "You've got 15 minutes. Just talk." 15 minutes, the scant time for a person to prove they deserve to be heard. When the red on-air light flicked on, Pierre stood before the mic. His hands shook so much the mic nearly fell from its stand, breath caught, throat dry. But then he closed his eyes, breathed deep, and started talking. Not a grand intro, not the shouting radio voice of the time, but a simple greeting. "Good afternoon, Philadelphia. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a great day in the morning." In the small control room, those outside fell silent. In just minutes, his voice spread across the city, warm, real, and strangely close. No one at the station expected they'd just witnessed something special. He didn't speak at people, he spoke to them. In the early days, Pierre still wasn't used to the pace, still arrived earlier than anyone, wiped the mic himself, adjusted cables, handwritten scripts minute by minute. He feared mistakes, saying too much, but also too little. Each time he left the studio, he'd look back at the just extinguished red, on-air light, like leaving a church. And then, the miracle happened. Listeners started calling the station, not to request songs, but just to say, "Thank you, Pierre. Your voice makes me feel at peace." Some said hearing him was like talking to an old friend. Others said they turned on the radio just to hear him tell stories, not caring what the music was. Pierre never called it success. He just called it connection. Connection. He believed radio wasn't broadcasting but sharing a city's breath. And so, day by day, amid wild rock shows, he kept his slow, gentle voice, interspersing odd philosophies. He talked about love, loneliness, kindness. Sometimes he paused just to be silent a few seconds, so listeners could hear themselves. Radio, he once said, isn't about being loud, it's about being real. The phrase, "great day in the morning," became Philadelphia's familiar greeting. People repeated it in coffee shops, on buses, in crowded streets like a password for loving life. To him, it wasn't just an opener, but a small prayer to the world. WMMR from then became rock's cathedral, where music wasn't just played, but lived. At noon, when other stations aired news or ads, Pierre talked about tracks that saved him, artists who dared live true, listeners fighting loneliness. "If you're out there, and today feels heavy," he once said, "put on some Floyd and breathe." Those words rang through millions of radio speakers, piercing cramped apartments, small shops, hearts thirsting to be understood. Sometimes, he ended shows with lines no one taught him: "Be kind. The world is tired." Or simply, "Thanks for listening, good citizens." Each time he turned off the mic, Pierre sat a few more minutes, looking at Philadelphia's light strips through the glass. He didn't know how many out there were listening, but he believed if even one felt less alone, all the hardship was worth it. And so, day by day, year by year, that voice seeped into the city's breath. In that noisy, competitive place, he didn't shout, didn't compete, didn't stand out. He just existed quietly, persistently, like an underground stream of humanity. And because of that, in a city of car horns and millions of voices, his became the sound people sought for peace. In a city of noise, his calm became the anthem. In the 1,980 seconds and 1,990 seconds, Pierre Robert wasn't just a name, he was Philadelphia's soul. In an era when MTV ruled, when giant bands like U2, Pink Floyd, Bruce Springsteen, or The Who filled stadiums, Pierre was the link between stage lights and listeners' hearts at home. He was the bridge between artists and the public, between roaring guitars and lonely nights no one talked about. With his deep, light but steady voice, he made even the world's biggest stars listen. Bruce Springsteen once said after an interview, "Pierre didn't ask about the album, he asked about my fear, and I answered because I knew he meant it." David Gilmour of Pink Floyd just smiled. He has a way of making people say things they'd never say on air. Pierre never thought he was special. He just saw himself as the keeper of rhythm between crowds and notes. But to Philadelphia, his voice was breath. Amid skyscrapers and sad rains, his noon voice rose like sunlight through fog. Artists respected him. Colleagues admired him. Listeners loved him, all like an invisible wave linking Pierre to the city he served. But to maintain that, he paid a price. Packed schedules, endless outdoor events, interviews, meetings, program prep, no days off. 6 days a week, he arrived at the station in the dark and left when the city was lit. Sometimes others saw him beaming when turning on the mic, but no one saw his hands tremble slightly from fatigue or his backache when bending to pick up tapes. Pierre always smiled, always doing fine, always said, "I'm fine, thank you." But at night, when everyone went home, studio lights dimmed, he still Saturday. Outside the glass, city lights reflected on his face, a face both kind and tired, proud yet soaked in loneliness. He looked at thousands of lit windows, wondering how many out there were awake, needing a voice to feel less alone. And in that moment, he whispered to himself, "When everyone goes home, I stay to make sure someone still feels less alone." That wasn't just a saying, but Pierre's life philosophy, the reason he kept broadcasting though his body was weary, eyes stung from lights. In the 1,990 seconds, as the world entered the digital age, he stayed loyal to vinyl, cassettes, real voices. He didn't like automation, didn't like computer-programmed music. "Radio without soul is just static," he once said. And so, he pressured himself to keep that soul alive. The more successful, the more he feared losing his real self. He once told a colleague, "I'm afraid one day I'll turn on the mic and feel nothing. Then I'll know it's time to stop." But he never stopped. Even tired, voice hoarse, knees aching, he still came. On stormy days, station empty, Pierre climbed stairs himself with heavy tape boxes, clothes soaked. He turned on the mic, breathed lightly and said, "Good afternoon, good citizens. Great day in the morning, huh?" Then played music. His voice trembled slightly, but listeners didn't know, just heard a familiar friend. In WMMR's archives, hundreds of photos remain of Pierre smiling behind the mic, pen in hand, noting, hair loose, eyes warm. No one in those photos knew that after shows ended, he often sat in the dark another hour. Not because work wasn't done, but because he wasn't ready to leave. "I feel if I walk out, the music will be empty," he told a young technician. They laughed, thinking he joked. But to Pierre, it was real. The first sign of back pain started late 1990 seconds. At first just slight soreness, then lingering ache. Doctors told him to rest, cut hours. He nodded, but next morning was at the station like nothing happened. He just joked, "My back hurts from sitting loving music too long." The line made everyone laugh, but the smile hid real pain. Each time bending for tapes, he braced the table, tried not to wince. Some nights, home, he curled up, back throbbing, hands still flipping notes for tomorrow's show. The pain didn't scare him, he only feared a day he couldn't continue. In those years, amid glory and exhaustion, listeners' laughter and studio silence, Pierre Robert stayed true to what shaped him young, loyalty to his real self. He never tried to become a legend. He just tried to stay human. But sometimes, the cost of still being human was what hurt him most. Amid the spotlight of a brilliant career, Pierre Robert lived a life of solitude that silenced the soul. When the mic went off and the last song faded, he went home to no one waiting beyond the door. Quiet evenings in Gladwine, the small house filled only with the smell of cold coffee and wind blowing through the window frame. People often think someone beloved by an entire city can't be lonely, but Pierre was the opposite proof. He had millions of listeners, hundreds calling his name daily, but no one truly knew the man behind that voice. In 40 years, he never married, never had children. Once, when asked about love, he just smiled, eyes sparkling yet deeply sad. Radio doesn't leave space for much else. People say there was a woman who once entered his life, a young photographer working at the station in the late 1980 seconds. They shared long nights in the studio, talking about music, about dreams no one understood. But when she wanted him to rest, to go somewhere far away together, Pierre refused. "I can't turn off the mic, even for a day." In the end, she left, leaving a note on a small piece of paper, "I love you, but I can't love the silence after every show." Pierre kept that paper in his desk drawer for years, never mentioning it again. Friends say, Pierre could make the whole city laugh, but he never talked about himself. Whenever anyone asked about his personal life, he'd switch to telling someone else's story, a musician, a listener, or sometimes a stray dog he adopted. He had a way of turning every story about himself into a lesson for others, as if talking about himself was a luxury. Beneath that gentle exterior, his body began to rebel. Back and joint pain grew severe, spreading to his arms. Occasionally, during live shows, he had to grit his teeth through the ache, clenching his fists to keep his voice steady. By 2000, he had to get acupuncture twice a week. People often saw him leave the station late at night, driving straight to an Eastern medicine clinic in a small neighborhood in Balasinwid. A nurse recalled, "He always smiled, always said thank you, but when he lay on the treatment table, I saw him tremble from pain. I asked why he didn't rest. He said, 'I still have songs I haven't played.'" At an age when many retire, Pierre still worked 6 days a week, still curated playlists himself, still read every listener email. His body weakened, but his loyalty to his audience grew stronger than ever. He saw them as family, the reason to wake each morning. "If I stop," he once said, "someone out there will feel alone again." The words were simple, but they silenced anyone who heard them. He wasn't exaggerating, because in truth, Pierre's greatest fear wasn't death, but silence. He feared a day the mic wouldn't turn on, the station wouldn't broadcast, and thousands driving through the city would feel something missing they couldn't name. Sometimes, he joked, "I'm just the guy keeping the wheels spinning. If I stop smiling, the whole city might stop too." But deep down, it wasn't a joke. It was real belief, beautiful to the point of heartbreak. Increasingly, he withdrew, appearing less at events, avoiding cameras, spending more time in the studio, the only place he felt seen. When others left, Pierre stayed, listening to the fading background music, ensuring no one out there felt abandoned. He lived on connection, yet lived alone. An old colleague once said, "Pierre isn't lonely from lack of people. He's lonely from giving too much without knowing how to receive." Maybe he understood that, but he never changed. He carried his pain like a sacred secret, hiding it behind a kind smile and warm voice. No one saw him complain. No one heard him talk about illness. Only the mic knew, and the music knew. He carried pain like a secret, afraid that if he stopped smiling, the world would stop spinning. At an age when people seek peace, Pierre chose the harshest path. Keep smiling while his body crumbled. Keep broadcasting while his heart grew heavier. But perhaps that was how he loved the world, by shouldering his pain so the rest could hear one more peaceful day. Entering the 2000s, the world changed faster than radio waves. The internet flooded every corner, music now just a click away, and smartphones began replacing the radios once central to so many homes. Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, a whole new era of sound was born, making FM voices suddenly outdated. American radio shook. Major stations fired veteran voices en masse, changed formats, youthfulized entire programs to chase the new generation. DJs once revered were now called too slow, too soft, too old. In Philadelphia, WMMR couldn't escape the wave. Internal meetings dragged on for hours. New managers, younger, colder, talked about brand repositioning strategy. On the short list, Pierre Robert's name appeared. The man tied to that frequency for over 20 years was now just a number in the budget. When he heard, Pierre didn't react. He sat still, twisting his old silver ring, eyes gazing far out the glass window where the city kept moving. He said softly, "If they take my mic, they take my air." It wasn't defiance. It was a confession, simple, desperate, and so real it silenced the room. To Pierre, the mic wasn't just a job. It was lungs, breath, the only part making him feel alive. But the managers didn't get it. They wanted youthful energy, fast, short, viral. They said, "Need ad time, need DJs who know TikTok." Pierre didn't know what TikTok was, didn't care. He only knew radio is about people, not algorithms. But in an era where people listened less and watched more, his voice was fading in the storm. News leaked that the show might be cut. In days, Philadelphia's listener community boiled over. WMMR's fan page flooded with comments, emails overwhelmed the inbox. One listener wrote, "Pierre was my father's voice when he drove to work. He was my voice when I felt alone. You can't just erase that." A student wrote, "I don't know a world without his great day in the morning. Please don't take him away." Hashtag number Keep Pierre on Air spread across social media, repeated at concerts, on T-shirts, even handwritten on walls near the station. Tens of thousands signed a petition to keep him. Meanwhile, Pierre still showed up every morning like nothing happened. He avoided papers, avoided his name, still made coffee, adjusted the mic, played music, greeted listeners, good citizens. Let's make today a great day in the morning. Someone asked why he didn't speak up. He just smiled. "I don't fight with love, I just trust it." And love truly saved him. Finally, station leadership backed down before the massive support. Pierre stayed. The noon show endured like a living legacy Philadelphia wouldn't let anyone touch. The day he got the news, colleagues hugged him, laughing through tears. Pierre just quietly bowed in thanks, whispering, "It wasn't me they saved. It was all of us." But deep inside, A crack had formed. After that, he smiled less, grew quieter, as if understanding that listener love, however great, couldn't stop time's wheel. He began fearing the mic's silence, the feeling when the red on-air light went off without knowing if it would turn on again. Every noon, before going live, he lightly touched the console, like praying, "Please, let me have one more day." The digital storm passed, and Pierre stood firm, but its price was fractured faith. He survived that fierce storm, honored as an icon, but inside, part of him had broken. He survived the digital storm, but something inside him cracked. Later, colleagues said that from that year, Pierre grew more somber, eyes deeper, voice sadder, yet warmer than ever. He no longer spoke to stand out. He spoke to hold on to what was slipping away, listening, kindness, and a world where music was still how people found each other. After a victory that seemed to redefine radio's value in the digital age, Pierre Robert found no serenity. Instead, he grew quieter, more withdrawn, as if that battle had taken the last of his life force. The applause, the praising articles, the photos of him smiling at the mic, all temporary. When the media wave passed, Pierre returned to where he belonged most, the small studio, filled with vinyl plastic smell and the hum of old amps. To others, it was a workplace. To him, it was home. The mic was his closest friend, music his breath, the red on-air light, the only warmth keeping him from emptiness. He once half-joked to a young colleague, "I live here more than at home. Maybe the station is my early grave." The technician laughed, thinking he exaggerated, but Pierre's look then held no joke. As he aged, he appeared less outside. Station parties, award ceremonies, big events Pierre began politely declining. He cited busyness, but really just didn't want to see young, energetic faces he knew he no longer fit. Old friends, those bonded from when WMMR still used reel tapes, left one by one. Some retired, some passed, some fought illness. Each sad news, Pierre quietly sent flowers, then sat alone in the studio, playing old tapes, hearing their laughter echo from the past. The more he listened, the more he felt like the sole survivor of a fading world. One evening, when Philadelphia slept, he stayed at the station late. Outside, snow fell thick. Inside the studio, only golden light from a small desk lamp. He opened his notebook, wrote a few lines in shaky script. "Maybe I've outlived my time." The short line held a lifetime. No one read that diary page, but if they had, they'd hear the sigh behind each word, the sigh of someone without regret, just sad the world moved on without looking back. One sleepless night, Pierre drove his old van, the Minerva, that was home in his youth, to the back lot. He sat inside, turned on the weak heater, rummaged through old tapes for his first 1981 recording. When his voice played young, bright, full of faith, he laughed. Then tears rolled down his cheeks. "Good afternoon, Philadelphia. It's a great day in the morning." The 26-year-old's voice, full of belief, rang like from another world. He sat silent, playing it over and over, like talking to who he once was. That young voice hurt him to the core. He knew he was still Pierre Robert, but no longer the Pierre on tape. Time had made him an icon, but also stole the person. He whispered, "I miss him, the boy who still believed he had time." Each year, Pierre kept working, but spoke less. His show grew deeper, more introspective, like dialoguing with memory more than listeners. The philosophies he wove between songs were no longer just to comfort someone out there, but to hold himself together. One listener wrote, "Pierre doesn't just play songs anymore. He teaches us how to survive the quiet." That was truer than anyone. He had become a saint of the airwaves, the lonely saint of radio, bearing a generation's silence for others' peaceful minutes. But deep down, he knew even radio was fading. Younger generations heard music through earbuds, not waves, not voices. Sometimes he looked at the console wondering, how many are really listening to me anymore? The answer was often just faint static between songs. That loneliness wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, it smoldered. eroded, made each breath heavier. But Pierre didn't complain. He just smiled, looked up, saw the on-air light still glowing, and whispered, "As long as someone's still out there, I'll keep talking." At an age when many seek rest, he chose to sit in the sealed room, talking to the invisible. Sometimes a breeze through the window fluttered a paper on the desk, and he softly said, "Is that you, old friend?" Not clear to whom. Maybe the lost, maybe his own youth. In that quiet, Pierre realized the hardest part of aging wasn't back pain, wasn't dimming eyes or hoarse voice. He realized that the hardest part of aging isn't pain, it's watching the world move on without you. And so, he kept living alone amid sound waves, both witness and guardian, to a world drifting from the sounds he loved. Entering the new decade, Pierre's body began rebelling as if demanding back all the years he'd borrowed to serve the world. From 2020, back pain grew fiercer. At first just soft groans when standing, then endless sleepless nights, spine aching like fire. His hands, stiffened from decades twisting knobs and flipping vinyl, now trembled lightly touching the mic. His eyes blurred, studio lights forcing him to squint at scripts. Many shows, colleagues saw him sit longer than usual, pausing mid-sentence, taking a deep breath before continuing. Doctors told him, "Pierre, it's time to rest. Your body can't take it anymore." But he just smiled, voice hoarse. "I'll rest when I'm dead." It wasn't proud, it was a vow. Pierre couldn't leave the mic, because the mic was breath, the only place he still felt alive. Every morning, body wrecked, he drove to the station, back stiff as wood, hands shaking opening the door. Every step slow, careful. But the moment the red on-air light glowed, he became someone else. That voice, though hoarse, still warm and sincere, still making the city pause amid chaos to listen. No one knew that after each show, he slumped in the chair, panting, sweat beading on his forehead. Many times he fainted lightly in the studio, helped out by colleagues. When they worried, he just said, "Probably lack of sleep." But the truth was his body was declining fast. Pain spread to neck, shoulders, arms. Sometimes he used pain patches right during work. Some days, he couldn't hold a pen, had to ask technicians to note for him. The body betrayed, but the spirit didn't. He still forced smiles, still joked with colleagues, "This back only hurts when I'm not listening to music." But behind the smile were long white nights, sitting in silent rooms, icing shoulders, watching moonlight through the window, thinking of years that wouldn't return. Many noticed his voice weakening, breath heavier. Short pauses, slower inhales, all revealed, unhideable. Some listeners sent letters asking, "Pierre, are you okay?" He read each line, smiled, then didn't reply. He feared their worry, their pity. Pierre once said, "Radio isn't for complaining. It's where others find hope." So he hid the illness, hid everything. Hid the pain, the tremors, even the tears falling when music played. He didn't want listeners to hear fear in his voice. He only wanted them to hear love, the one thing still intact in him. Some days, colleagues caught him sitting silent in the studio after the show ended, hands clutching the mic, head bowed low. They thought he slept, but he was just trying to breathe. "Pierre, you can't keep going like this," one said softly. He opened his eyes, tired smile but kind. "If I stop, I'll die right in the silence. And I hate silence." That was how he lived and how he gradually left life. Each day, a small part of him faded, not from illness, but from boundless devotion. He once said in a final interview, "I don't believe I was born to be famous. I was born to serve music." And indeed, he lived that way, a soul loyal to self-destruction, tying his life to the mic, like the only thread connecting him to the world. When pain became a companion, he learned to endure in silence. No medicine helped much. No one convinced him to rest. To him, each broadcast was a battle, and he was ready to fight to his last breath. In a small notebook, found after he passed, shaky but clear words, "Every day I'm still on air is a miracle. Every pain reminds me that I'm still alive. Those lines choked anyone who read them, because in the end, Pierre didn't die from illness. He died from devotion, from unconditional loyalty to what he loved most. He wasn't dying of illness. He was dying of devotion. The last week of October 2025, Philadelphia's air was colder than usual. Autumn wind whipped through empty streets, carrying dampness and an unusual quiet. In the small house in Gladwin, Pierre Robert woke early as always. Back pain made standing straight hard, hands trembling so much it took minutes to button his shirt. But as for over 40 years, he insisted on going to the station. "I just need one more show," he whispered, like speaking to himself. The old van Minerva slowly pulled out of the driveway, headlights cutting through fog. In the back seat, the familiar leather bag held a few tapes, a notebook, and the old coffee mug he'd carried since the 80 seconds. Outside, the city slowly woke, streetlights reflecting on the windshield like faint sparks of memory. At WMMR, Pierre leaned on the wall to climb the stairs. Each step sent a small pain down his spine, but he still smiled at the receptionist, the young technician, everyone in the hallway. "Good morning, good citizens," he greeted softly, voice hoarse and tired, yet with a strange light in it. That day, no one knew they were about to witness his final show. At noon, Pierre entered the familiar studio. He adjusted the mic, sat in the chair that had been his for half a lifetime, trembling hands placing the coffee cup beside him. The red, on-air light glowed. The station fell dead silent. His voice rang out, huskier than usual, each word dragged with heavy breath. "Good afternoon, good citizens. Whatever storm you're in, remember music will hold you." A long pause followed, then "Wish You Were Here" played. Many listeners on the radio waves sensed something different. Pierre's voice was weak, slow, but every word carved with soul. No more wit, no more jokes, only warmth and peace like being sent off with music. In the studio, soft light, and Pierre sat, watching the clock hands turn slowly, each minute passing like a final heartbeat. When the song ended, he took a deep breath, voice trembling but steady. "Thank you for listening, my friends. Be kind to one another. Take care of the citizens." He turned off the mic, hand gently resting on the control knob like a ritual. No one spoke for seconds. Then, one by one, colleagues entered. Pierre stood, trying to hide the pain, hugging each. He smiled, whispering to old friends, "You did good, kid." And to the last one, he murmured, "Keep it real. That's all that matters." They didn't know those were his last words. The show ended. He left the station slowly. Afternoon sky gray and cold, light raindrops falling on his coat. Pierre paused at the door, turned back to look at the WMMR sign one last time, cloudy eyes flashing like a final day's light. "See you tomorrow," he said softly, but no one expected there would be no tomorrow. Dawn the next day, the 29th of October 2025, Philadelphia woke in silence. In the small room, faint dawn light slipped through curtains, covering the figure of the man lying stillently on the sofa. Beside him, the vinyl of The Dark Side of the Moon still on the turntable, needles stopped mid-groove, emitting a faint tick-tick, the coffee cup half full, still warm. Pierre passed in his sleep, gently as if dozing after a long show. No pain, no witness, only music, and the silence he loved all his life. When colleagues heard, the station sank into hush. The young technician, the last to hug him the night before, stood before the mic, choked and speechless. After seconds, he just played yesterday's show tape. Pierre's voice filled the speakers, weak but clear. "Whatever storm you're in, remember music will hold you." And then, "Wish You Were Here" played again. Outside, rain fell, soft and steady. No one cried aloud, but the city seemed to hold its breath. Pierre once said, "If I go, let me go with the music." And so he did, leaving the world the way he lived in it, in harmony, in silence, in others' hearts. He left the world the way he entered it, surrounded by sound and silence. News of Pierre Robert's death spread through the foggy morning like a slow tear ripping the city's heart. At 7 a.m., WMMR's homepage showed only white text on black. In memory of our beloved Pierre Robert, 1955, 2025. No ads, no morning show, no laughter, no news. The entire broadcast stopped for 24 hours instead. Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead, and old Pierre recordings. Between mournful melodies, his voice whispered over the waves like a returning echo, "Be kind, good citizens. It's a great day in the morning." Just that, and thousands broke down. In every corner of Philadelphia, people pulled over to listen, to remember, to believe that sound was still somewhere. Outside WMMR headquarters, crowds gathered. Long lines in light rain, bringing flowers, candles, photos of Pierre beaming behind the mic. A middle-aged man in an old leather jacket, trembling, said, "I used to listen to him every day on my way to work." He made the silence less scary. A college student placed a white candle, whispering, "He was the voice that made my loneliness bearable." No one came just to cry. They came to thank, to say goodbye to the man who walked with them through 4 decades' ups and downs, who taught them to find light in sound, tenderness in loneliness. Walls around the station covered with notes, "You taught me to breathe. Thank you for keeping us company. We'll keep the music playing." Someone played "Wish You Were Here" on a small speaker. The crowd sang along, voices choked but united. Philadelphia, city of steel, train whistles, gray winters suddenly softened. In that moment, everyone was Pierre's good citizens. News quickly spread beyond city limits. Major artists from Bruce Springsteen to Bono, surviving Pink Floyd members to Dave Grohl posted tributes. Springsteen wrote, "Pierre wasn't just a DJ. He was the heartbeat of Philadelphia." Bono said briefly, "Every city has a sound." In Philly, it was his voice. In London, a famous rock station dedicated an hour to old Pierre interviews with British bands, calling him the poet of the air. In California, the old station that rejected him sent a message, "We didn't hear him then. The world sure hears him now." That night, WMMR aired a special, "The City That Fell Quiet." No host, no intro. Just random Pierre clips from thousands of archived hours. His laugh, his urging listeners to "be kind," and the final one where he spoke of time. It all fades, but the music stays. His voice mixed with rain on the window glass, blending with the city's breath. Listeners felt he was still there, just tuned to a frequency humans couldn't catch. In old neighborhoods, coffee shops, restaurants, everyone talked about him. Major papers ran memorial pages. A young Philadelphia Inquirer writer wrote, "He made the ordinary divine. Through his voice, the mundane became poetry." An old colleague said through tears, "Pierre didn't talk about music. He talked through it." There's a difference. Many compared him to a priest without a church, the keeper of the city's soul through every song. They said losing him wasn't just losing an icon, but losing part of Philadelphia's pulse. Philadelphia didn't just lose a man, it lost its mirror. In the days after, graffiti of him appeared everywhere. Long silver hair, kind smile, below the words, "The music never stops." Local artists painted him on walls, bridges, corners he once walked. WMMR set up a small memorial in the lobby, displaying his mic, headphones, chair, and old coffee cup. Thousands lined up to touch the mic like a farewell ritual. No one spoke loudly, just whispers, "Thank you, Pierre." The final night of the Memorial Week, the station replayed his last show in full, unedited, no ads. When Pierre's voice said, "Whatever storm you're in, remember music will hold you," thousands across the city turned on radios at once. On highways, balconies, small apartments, everyone fell silent. Outside, light rain. Philadelphia had never been so quiet and never so beautiful. After days of tears and memorial songs, as radio waves slowly returned to normal, Pierre's colleagues began clearing his third-floor office, where he sat for over 4 decades. They thought it simple: pack a few notebooks, old photos, dusty tapes. But opening drawers and cabinets, they discovered things no one knew: quiet pieces of the real Pierre Robert. In the wooden cabinet under the desk, the young technician found dozens of sealed envelopes, each labeled with a name and "Tuition support, keep chasing your frequency." Inside were signed checks, all sent to communications students at Temple University and Drexel, who had written Pierre about their radio dreams. None knew their scholarships came from him, all sent under "A friend from the airwaves." In the next drawer, a neat stack of receipts, hospitals, clinics, and odd addresses later confirmed as old listeners. A woman once wrote begging for help with her son's rare illness. Months later, her bills were mysteriously paid. An elderly man called in 2018, saying he lived alone and couldn't afford hearing aids. A week later, he got a package with a card. "So you can still hear the music, PR." All from him, but he never spoke of it. In another corner, an old box labeled "The Other Citizens." Inside, transfer receipts to animal rescues, from Philadelphia Animal Welfare Society to small suburban shelters. Photos of dogs and cats taped inside the lid, each noted with names, like friends. "He never talked about this," a colleague whispered, eyes welling. "He came in, did his show, and went home. We thought that was his whole life, but this was his real broadcast." Then, clearing the last drawer, they found a yellowed envelope. On it, in familiar handwriting, "For whoever finds this after I'm gone." The letter was short but silenced the room. In it, Pierre wrote, "If kindness is remembered, I'll never truly fade. I didn't build monuments or make fortunes. I only tried to make people feel seen even for a minute. That's enough. If someone smiles because of something I said, then my voice will live forever." Oh, no signature, just a small, familiar symbol, a circle with a handwritten P in the center. They framed the letter and placed it in the station lobby, under his old mic, not as a relic, but a reminder. News of the letter spread fast. Thousands of listeners came to the station, not just to mourn but to share personal memories, small moments when Pierre's voice changed something in them. A middle-aged man said he planned to end his life in 2010, but turning on the car radio, Pierre was saying, "If you're still breathing, the world still needs you." He cried, pulled over, and lived. A nurse said Pierre once visited her hospital. No cameras, no press, just bringing pastries and thanking the COVID-19 care team. A homeless man who sheltered near WMMR said in winter 2019, Pierre brought him a wool blanket and said, "Everyone deserves a little warmth, body and soul." Those stories, small but together, formed a symphony of kindness. No one knew why Pierre never spoke of them. Maybe he believed good deeds didn't need recognition, or that silence made kindness travel farther. A close colleague said, Pierre believed kindness loses its power when it's advertised. And indeed, he lived that: no public will, no honors, just quiet acts like radio waves touching millions unseen. When press asked why WMMR didn't know about the donations, the station manager said simply, because he didn't want thanks. He wanted continuity. At the final memorial, Pierre's letter aired, read by his closest colleague. At "If kindness is remembered, I'll never truly fade," the voice choked. Outside, thousands listening in cars, homes, streets stopped. No one spoke, just a shared feeling. Pierre hadn't left. He was still there. In softer voices, sudden thank yous, tenderness passed on. He left no estate, no heirs. He left no heirs, only hearts. After the memorial, Philadelphia didn't return to normal. A quiet void slipped into daily life, like someone removed a vital frequency the city breathed through. But instead of letting that silence become loss, WMMR turned it into continuation. 1 month after Pierre passed, the station announced the Pierre Robert Fund, an annual scholarship for broadcasting and communication students who shared his belief that music and words can heal the world. On the fund's page, just one quote from his notebook: "The microphone is not power, it's a responsibility to care." Each year, scholarship recipients must complete a Radio of Kindness project, bringing music, stories, or kindness to the community. The founders said it wasn't just a scholarship, but a candle in new hands, lit from the flame Pierre left. And then, the following spring, the city honored him in the truest way. Pierre Robert's portrait was hung at the Philadelphia Music Walk of Fame beside Hall & Oates, Patti LaBelle, and The Roots. In the photo, he was captured as he lived: long hair, kind smile, warm bright eyes, no pretense. Hundreds gathered in gentle sunlight, looking up at the plaque with his name, applauding not in grief, but knowing part of the city's soul was etched forever. A young DJ who idolized him spoke. "He didn't just inspire, he taught us to keep our hearts amid the noise. To us, he was the guardian angel of the mic." The words silenced the crowd, then brought tears. In the months after, radio stations across America held special tributes. No one mandated it. It was natural. Young DJs who never met Pierre played his favorite songs, repeated his legendary noon greeting, "Great day in the morning." They said it was their way of thanking the man who taught them radio wasn't a job, but a mission. A DJ in Seattle said through tears, "Fame shouts, but legacy whispers. Pierre taught us that." Indeed, if Ozzy Osbourne screamed to fight darkness, Pierre whispered to soothe it. One used shouts to survive, the other silence to endure. One lived amid flares and stages, the other sat in a small room, talking to millions of quiet souls daily. But in the end, both became icons of the same thing: authenticity. Only Ozzy existed in storms, Pierre in breezes. Journalists wrote he left a legacy of silence, a strange power needing no fanfare. A veteran Rolling Stone editor commented, "Pierre proved that you don't have to be loud to be eternal." His calm became the heartbeat of an entire city. Indeed, in an age where people spoke louder to be noticed, he chose to speak softer to be understood. In the noisy media world, Pierre was the last to remind us that silence has its own sound. At WMMR, his old mic sits in a glass case, right where he's Saturday. No one uses it. The station decided to leave it as a symbol. Every morning, the young technician turns on the studio light 10 minutes early, letting it shine on the mic, a small ritual no one mentions, but all understand. Some days, when the signal briefly drops, people half joke, "Pierre's checking in again." Everyone laughs, but eyes glisten. Young students, first learning his name through the scholarship, often say they feel like walking a path Pierre paved. They say, "He taught us that the soul of radio is empathy, and in that, his legacy lives not in buildings, not fame, but spirit. He proved human strength lies not in what's said loudly, but in how it makes others listen with their hearts." When winter returned, WMMR aired a special called "The Legacy of Silence." No commentary, no ads, just Pierre's voice between old songs. In one replay, he said, "If someday this voice fades, don't be sad. It just means I've turned into the quiet between songs." The words silenced the city. Because that was him, a man dissolving into the pause between melodies, so the world kept turning, still connected by the sound of kindness. Pierre Robert has left, but he remains in the music, playing on FM 93.3 every noon, in the smiles of those who remember him, and in the very peace he spent his life sowing. He didn't need his name shouted, for he never sought glory. To Pierre, being remembered with kindness was enough. He taught us that fame shouts, but legacy whispers. And in those whispers, America still hears him, the man who made an entire city believe that sometimes gentleness is the strongest sound in the world. 1 week before he passed, when no one thought time was closing in, Pierre Robert sat in his small room, beside the pale yellow desk lamp and old laptop. It was dark, Philadelphia entering fall, leaves covering the porch, and he typed slowly, not for tomorrow's show, but something deeper. In the draft of his personal blog, where he rarely wrote, a short entry appeared, never posted. Every song I ever played was a prayer. If my time is near, I hope the silence that follows will be kind. No one knew the hour he wrote it, only that it was saved at 2:17 a.m., 7 days before he left. The simple words, no title, no intro, but carrying all Pierre ever was a man who saw music not just as echo, but as prayer. He didn't fear the end, only that when silence fell, it wouldn't be as gentle as the melodies he played. When Sharon, his colleague and closest friend, cleared his computer for the memorial, she stumbled on the blog entry. She paused long before the screen, eyes welling. Sharon was the one who shared thousands of shows with him, sat beside him when the on-air light glowed, witnessed him smile through pain. Trembling, she printed it, deciding it would be the final part of the memorial, the farewell gift Pierre unwittingly left the world. The memorial was held in WMMR's small auditorium, room for a few hundred, but outside, thousands gathered around the building. No one spoke much, just carrying small radios or tuning FM apps on phones. They knew at noon that day something special would happen. When all settled, Sharon stepped on stage. She didn't cry, didn't tremble, just stood, voice choked but steady, reading his words, each like a lingering breath in the air. Every song I ever played was a prayer. If my time is near, I hope the silence that follows will be kind. The sound broadcast through the station speakers, across the city, over rooftops, shops, bus stops. Somewhere, a driver pulled over. A mother sobbed in the kitchen. An elderly man placed a hand on the radio, nodding softly. None had met Pierre, but all felt he spoke to them alone. After reading, Sharon added one line, short like a needle to the heart. He didn't fear death, he feared not being useful. The auditorium fell silent. No applause, just sniffles, then slow, spreading claps, reaching outside where thousands clapped in unison silence. Not praise, gratitude. Right after, as planned without reminder, all Philadelphia tuned radios at noon. They called it One Last Broadcast of Gratitude. Every city station switched to WMMR. No ads, no host, just Pierre's voice from old recordings. Good afternoon, good citizens. Wherever you are, may today be gentle. Then music, Wish You Were Here, Ripple, the sound of silence. Each song a piece of a soul reassembled in millions shared memory. Buildings played through outdoor speakers, windows wide open. The city listening as one. A fractured world connected by the sound of a man no longer here but present in the most beautiful way. Sharon, by the window watching the street, saw lines of cars stopped, heads raised, eyes closed like praying. He's still here, she whispered. He's still broadcasting. When the final song ended, Pierre's voice returned once more, like farewell. Remember, even silence has its own song. Then the signal faded. Just faint static, light, lingering seconds, then gone. But in thousands' hearts, something began the warm silence he prayed would be kind. That evening, Sharon returned to the studio, sat in Pierre's chair, touched the cold mic. She didn't cry, just whispered, "You did it, Pierre. You kept the world kind." Then she turned off the light, leaving the room in gentle dark. Outside, night draped Philadelphia like a soft blanket. The city had learned silence not from loss, but gratitude. Pierre Robert never said goodbye, but perhaps he didn't need to. He left the way he lived, gently, full of love, leaving a silence making the world want to listen once more. Somewhere, on invisible waves, his voice still drifts not to anyone specific, but to all. A final greeting, a gentle breath, a song never ending. And as that night closed, Philadelphia didn't sink in grief. It just sighed softly like thanks to the man who taught the city that sometimes silence is the most beautiful music. Winter sunset fell over Philadelphia, the last light slipping through the third-floor WMMR studio windows. Inside, the familiar room where Pierre Robert sat for 44 years remained untouched. The old swivel chair, enameled coffee mug, faded silver mic, and Grateful Dead poster still there as if he'd just stepped out for a break and would return any moment. Afternoon light cut through floating dust, hitting the blinking frequency strip on the console. A young DJ, once mentored by Pierre in his early days, sat silent before the mic. His hand trembled slightly, turning on the old cassette player. Faint hiss, then the familiar voice filled the space. Great day in the morning. A laugh followed, husky, warm, gentle, the sound Philadelphia thought lost forever. The young DJ said nothing. He just bowed his head, listening, letting the voice pass through him, like an invisible handoff between generations. In the hallway, technicians paused, smiled at each other, and someone whispered, "He's back on air." Outside, the city shifted to night. But in the studio, time stopped. Millions of listeners still out there in apartments, small cafes, cars on the highway. And in that moment, for just seconds, they all heard the same voice, the same familiar feeling they had when Pierre was alive. No need to see the face, know the name, just that voice like a heartbeat quietly pulsing beneath the city's dust. The final line rang out, deep and slow, like farewell to a friend, a teacher, a soul merged with sound. He's gone, but his echo remains in every note, every song, every quiet moment when a lonely soul turns on the radio. The red on-air light flicked off. The room sank into silence. But that silence wasn't heavy. It was warm, kind, the silence of a complete ending. Down on the street, before WMMR headquarters, people still brought flowers daily. No longer crowds, just a few coming quietly, touching the plaque with his name. Some still wrote small notes, like speaking to him over the waves. "I'm still listening, Pierre." When night fully fell, a light breeze blew through the parking lot beside the building. Under dim yellow streetlights, Pierre's old van Minerva still parked there, restored, clean, peaceful. On the windshield, someone placed a paper with a few lines of poetry. "You taught us to speak softly. You taught us to listen deeply. The music still plays, and so do you." The breeze fluttered the paper, carrying faint scents of gas and vinyl into the air. The van itself seemed asleep, waiting for another journey, one needing no roads, just sound waves. In universities, Pierre Robert Fund scholarship students still tell each other about him, the man who turned kindness into a profession and profession into prayer. They still air small online shows, but every time they turn on the mic, they start with, "Good citizens, let's make today a great day in the morning." Not imitation, but remembrance that kindness has a sound, and Pierre taught them to hear it. In another corner of America, someone turns on the radio, accidentally catching his voice in an archive show. A young woman, not knowing who Pierre was, still smiles. An old man in his car turns up the volume. A stranger tells his wife, "That voice, it feels like home." And so, like magic, Pierre is broadcast once more. Not through frequency, but through memories of those who still believe in compassion. That night, Philadelphia was quiet. Inside the studio, lights off, only moonlight through the window glass. That light touched the old silver mic, reflecting a thin beam like a radio signal still transmitting, beyond time, no longer human but soul. Somewhere, along invisible frequencies, his voice still rings, not bound by space or body. That voice, now part of wind, waves, the city's heartbeat, it whispers in calm mornings, echoes between train whistles and rain, and sometimes, between two songs, someone hears a tiny sound, like a familiar greeting, "Great day in the morning." Pierre Robert never truly left. He just dissolved like light into sky, sound into silence. No ending for those who lived by love, just continuing frequencies, where a voice becomes comfort, a breath becomes faith. And as Philadelphia slept under silver moonlight, the mic still stood quietly, like waiting for a signal from the other side of the human world. Some legends burn out. Pierre simply faded into light. The story of Pierre Robert chokes us with sadness, not because he was a loud star, but because he was the quiet American kind, working a lifetime, loving his city a lifetime, then leaving in silence. From a California boy who didn't fit the world, sleeping in the van Minerva and recording on old cassettes, to becoming the soul of WMMR and all Philadelphia, that journey shows one thing. Some people don't need stages. They just need to be heard. The deepest pain in this story isn't his illness, back pain, joints, dim eyes, trembling hands from 2000 and 22,024, but that he hid it for fear of bothering listeners, being pitied, stopping being useful. He said, "I'll rest when I'm dead." And he did, going to work until the last day, broadcasting until the last minute, then passing the next morning beside dark side of the moon. Americans today, amid a busy nation, full of noise, arguments, can look to Pierre to remember real strength isn't speaking louder than others, but making others less alone. He quietly paid fans' medical bills, funded radio students, rescued animals, left a letter. If kindness is remembered, I'll never truly fade. When WMMR replayed his voice and the whole city stopped at noon to honor him, that proved kindness never vanishes. The lesson for Americans is clear. You don't need to conquer the world to become legend. You can become legend by caring for your city, your community, your good citizens around you. A life of decency can still be mourned by a nation. If Pierre Robert's story touched your heart, please subscribe to keep this frequency of compassion ringing. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video, where we continue telling of ordinary people who made America warmer.